Hi there, Adapters and Adapters TechX. It's great to have you back. Here we are at Catalyst for Conversion, powered by Revenue by Design. Here with Joe Stather. Joe is the head of Questex in Europe, and it's delighted to have you here, Joe. How are things?
Yeah, great, Sean. Delighted to be here.
Good. So we are going to have a conversation to get the ball rolling about asset management. We've got the world of AI, we've got the world of machine learning, we have the complexity of sweating an asset, we got revenue managers that are under pressure, marketers that are under pressure. How do you see that working from the asset manager's perspective?
It's a great question, quite a broad one at that. But just to set a bit of context around this. So coming towards the back end of last year, clearly we saw a lot of volatility, certainly from a macroeconomic point of view. The response has been a tightening of monetary policy. We've seen an increase in interest rates, and what that's essentially done is almost frozen the investment market, the transactions market. So certainly at the latter half of last year and into the start of this one, we haven't seen a great deal of deal flow or acquisition activity as far as hospitality investment's concerned. Now, we would hope that as the months go on and that kind of bid-ask spread and the expectations of buyers and sellers will slowly but surely come together and more activity from a transactions point of view will start to take place. But in the meantime, there's this acute focus on asset management to continue driving returns whilst there isn't an opportunity to go out there and buy new stock ultimately. Now, asset management has become more difficult because those increases in interest rates also mean that we've got a higher cost of capital, and that impacts CapEx, for example. So asset managers have their work cut out at the moment because they're trying to drive returns against a headwind of increasing inflation, pressure perhaps on the top line from a revenue generation point of view, pressure through the P&L, which is impacting profitability. And they're trying to do that whilst kind of thinking about ways that they can spend CapEx carefully to continue to drive returns. So the asset manager's really under pressure right now. But what we are seeing from an asset management point of view is a big focus on tech. And I'm preaching to the converted here, but tech can be incredibly valuable in terms of making sure that you're connecting with the customer, you're getting your fair share of demand into your hotel, you're capturing all of the revenue that you can. Even if that overall revenue pot is under pressure and shrinking, you want to make sure that you're capturing at least your fair market share. So we've got tech from that point of view, and knowing the customer and knowing what the customer is going to want in 3 to 5 years' time as well, and building that into CapEx plans and CapEx deployment. But then also through the P&L, looking at tech as a way to mitigate cost rises, ways to kind of, I suppose, enhance service delivery at a time that we're struggling to employ new staff.
And so we're here at a yield event, distribution, the nuts and bolts of that. Does the asset manager think about that, or they just delegate that to the head of the operation and just say, just get me the results we need relative to the market?
No, not at all. I mean, I think, coming back to that point around capturing as much of the customer as you possibly can and driving not just RevPAR, but total revenue as well. Revenue management is absolutely core to that. It's knowing the right customer, the most profitable customer. And we've heard today from Ben at Colliers, who heads their asset management team, that every conversation he's having, the revenue manager is at that table at a senior level of the organisation, helping to inform decision making and strategy setting.
How are the asset managers being educated in these nuances and also complexity, like what Frank Reeves is doing at Allura.ai? How are they being informed?
The asset managers? Well, I think, the revenue manager really is that connecting bridge between the customer and how the customer is reacting to pricing strategies and all the rest, and the asset manager, who is usually a kind of a step back or a line back from that frontline interaction with demand generation and with the guests. So it's really kind of bridging that link and interpreting the data that you're getting from the market and making sure that is an integral part of the asset management plan and strategy.
And we heard from the panel I was chairing and moderating this morning that the question is the revenue director, the distribution leader, are they really at the table, or is it's only sales, it's only head of sales, head of marketing, and that other layer isn't at the table?
I think we all recognise the importance of having the revenue manager at the table. Whether that's actually been implemented more broadly, I think there's a few question marks based on the reaction of some of your panellists, some of the audience to that question. clearly, as far as the revenue manager is concerned and being part of those conversations, I think it's absolutely key, not only to setting strategy, but also to measuring the success of strategy as well from an asset management point of view.
And where do you think the gaps are as we kind of finish this particular segment? The gaps in knowledge or the gaps in use? And then maybe we can talk about what Questex is doing. I think of your organisation and learning platform. So part 1 and part 2.
Sure. I mean, I think, the gaps are perhaps around the implementation of technology. We've said how important it is, but it's quite clear that that's happening at very different speeds in different organisations. Even some of the chains, I think, given their scale, have quite a hard time at a rapid rollout of technology. And again, kind of referring back to one of Ben's comments, he was saying how right now he sees the independents as almost having a bit of an advantage in being quick and nimble to respond to changing consumer needs. And again, the revenue management function is absolutely core to that. I think you look to some of the larger platforms, some of the chains perhaps, where you have kind of a cluster revenue management function as well. And do these revenue managers really get the time that they need, and do they have the bandwidth to fully understand their guests, their local markets, particularly at a time when a lot of demand is coming from local markets right now? So I think that's a potential gap as well. And whilst the independents maybe don't benefit from having such large kind of procurement power, distribution power and all the rest of it, there are some positives in there for them as well, and some opportunities which mean that perhaps they can succeed in today's climate.
So speaking of climate, I do want to bring this in. Are you seeing within the asset management and senior management connection with the asset owner or the whoever, that there is a value proposition being placed into a true value for promoting a product that is sustainable or is on the road to sustainability? Is that conversation coming into the real math and the real P&L?
It is. I suppose that's maybe not a side that I have direct exposure to, but just kind of
Anecdotally.
I mean, I think, people are, certainly from a larger corporate travel point of view, I think a lot of organisations are demanding kind of sustainable credentials now from a lot of their accommodation providers. That will no doubt only become more so. When you start to look at kind of asset valuations as well, perhaps we're still not quite at a stage where we're seeing really tangible discounts on assets that aren't ticking the sustainability boxes and aren't doing what they should be as far as ESG is concerned. But from what I'm hearing, if you're not kind of making the strides to be more compliant in that regard, it is starting to have an impact on your ability to source debt, for example, and that in turn will start to drive a bit of a differentiation as far as pricing is concerned. So hopefully, it's a shame it always comes back down to money, but when people are starting to be hurt in the pocket by the fact that they're not kind of doing enough around ESG, then that will be what triggers a move to becoming more compliant.
Oh, we'll keep an eye on that. So as we move forward now, Questex has got a lot of shows coming up. So how are you framing out the themes? What do you think is important this year?
Well, we've touched on asset management and the importance of asset management, right? So something that we're looking to do at the International Hotel Investment Forum, which is coming up in May, is to get far more into the weeds of asset management and to provide people that attend the event with some clear kind of takeaways that they can go away and implement within their own strategy and business as far as asset management's concerned. And that's involved launching a couple of new activations. So one of them is around ESG, working with the EEA. We've got a number of best-in-class exhibitors that are going to be in that space that are really kind of marching forward as far as ESG is concerned, a dedicated track. So we're covering ESG and really getting into the weeds of what it means across operating performance through to asset values. We're also doing the same on F&B, because I think that is an area...
And that's a new element this year.
That's a new element again this year. So F&B is clearly an area of a hotel which can be a real drag on performance if you're not doing it well. And there are some that are doing fantastic things in F&B. So it's really how, as a community, we can learn from, again, those which are kind of best in class right now.
And don't forget the annual hotel conference in Manchester later in the year. So thanks a million, Joe. We clearly always learn a lot from Joe, because Joe is an expert in summarising what's going on in real estate in this part of the world and all the other themes. So for everybody out there, remember that there's always good parties after this, so you should get into party mode. All of this doesn't have to be a burden. So from everybody here at Catalyst for Conversion and the adapters, have a great one and keep looking over the fence, please. It's kind of important.